My dear friends, today we are on the day 7 of our feast day Novena to St. Anne. By the way, do you all know what is the sub-theme for today? Some shake their head, some not. Well, okay. Today's topic is on mission perimeters. Correct or not? Okay, then I'm at the right place. So we continue with the overall theme on the city on a hilltop. When Father Jovita asked me to come and celebrate and to preach for this Mass, I was just looking at the different themes. I was thinking, wah, jialat. This is such a difficult topic to preach about, right? Because it's just a very chim topic. Mission perimeters. What exactly is mission perimeters? So actually, I tell you, I pray very hard because I really don't know what to preach about. But luckily, the Lord is really good. And He put today's topic on the feast day of Saint Mary Magdalene. Beautiful passage, right? We heard in the gospel today. Well, what is mission perimeters? Mission perimeters refers to the different areas where we are called to do mission. Often when we think of mission, we think of mission overseas, whether to Cambodia, Thailand, or other countries, where the gospel needs to be proclaimed, where the values of the gospel needs to reach the people and to bring the gospel to them. But mission begins from the heart. Faith and relationship with God are inseparable in mission. We don't need to look very far. We don't need to look outside of the confines of our family. Mission is here, in our family, in our parish, in our country. It can be a simple act of kindness or words of encouragement. Mission is not just about doing something, but being someone. That is, to be a missionary disciple. The church, the universal church, is missionary by nature. And so with that, as members of the Catholic Church, we need to be missionary. And so notice the difference here, right? To be, because as what St. Thomas Aquinas would say, that doing flows from our being. Okay, now this is just an introduction, right? Just to give you a kind of snapshot of what's going to happen this preaching itself. So are you all prepared to stay until 10 p.m.? Okay. So now we go to the main course. But before we go to the main course, I need to give you some appetizer. And so allow me to share a story as an appetizer to help us open up to the readings today and to St. Anne as we continue to pray and ask for her intercessions. And so recently, I've been catching up with some of the catechumens and candidates in my parish in Holy Cross as part of the RCIA interviews because they are going to be baptized in November. And so I met up with this elderly couple who was sharing with me their life story. And so today, I would like to share this story with all of you. It was actually their son who kept encouraging them to go for RCIA. And so this elderly man, he's roughly around 84 this year, shared with me that from their house, they stay at West Coast. From their house, they could see the stained glass of Holy Cross. The only distance between them is just the highway. And so he felt very drawn to want to find out about the Catholic faith. And so he told his wife that he wants to go to Holy Cross, and his wife is just being very adorable. She told him, if you want to go to church, Catholic church, you must go for RCIA. And then he said, okay, let's go. Let's go for RCIA, right? So she said, you sure? Because you cannot just anyhow go, no? You need to go for course. And he said, can. So they went, right? So they tried to find out about the RCIA journey in Holy Cross, and their son helped them to register for the RCIA. But what moved me in my conversation with them is their commitment. Elderly couple, both in 70s, 80s, their attendance is almost 100%. They are so joyful, so excited about their faith journey, but the initial seed of faith was planted by their son. Whether or not the son knows it doesn't matter, because he is being the missionary disciple to share the faith with his parents. The son received the light and love of Christ. Now he passed the light and share the love of Christ with his parents. Now with that, we go to the main course. So today I have 3 points for us to consider this evening. First, the first mission perimeter is the heart. Second, mission changes how we see people. And third, to be sent out. And so the first mission perimeter is the heart. St. Paul tells us in today's reading, in the letter to the Corinthians and all of us, that the love of Christ overwhelms us. And so when we go to the root understanding of the word overwhelm in the reading today, the word overwhelms comes from the Greek word synehi, which means to hold together, to compel, or to perplex. And so the love of God compels us or perplexes us to be someone, to do something. And so mission is not just about a program, rather it begins with an encounter. It begins with me. And so today, as we celebrate the feast day of St. Mary Magdalene, we heard of her encounter in the gospel today, how she encountered Christ, how her heart was converted, how we see a change, even though it's very subtle, right? That's the beauty of the Gospel of John. The key phrase here in the Gospel is, she turned around. She turned around. The desire to see Christ must take place. And so the desire to see Christ was the thing that made Mary Magdalene desire Christ. She loved the Lord so much that she thought that the man was a gardener. But actually, the man was Jesus Christ himself. And so when she turned around, that was her conversion story. That was her encounter with the love of Christ. Going back to my appetizer, right? The elderly couple. That desire was planted in their hearts. The elderly man, remember what I said? The elderly man wanted to go to Holy Cross to see. It's not just about seeing the stained glass, but there is something more deeper in this sense. He wanted to see Christ. And he was drawn. The stained glass was just the very initial stage. The stained glass drew him to enter the church, but the encounter is with the Lord, not with the stained glass. Right? The stained glass is just a tool, but the encounter is with the Lord. And as we celebrate the Novena of St. Anne, she too allowed the conversion to take place. Of course, not much is said or even recorded in the scriptures about St. Anne, but we can see how St. Anne must have been like through the life of Mary. We often say, right, children are the chip of the old block. And we see the humility, we see the love of Mary, we see her care and concern. That, my dear friends, is perhaps what St. Anne would have taught Mary what to do, how to lead her life, how to be a pious Jewish woman, how to be a pious daughter of God. Mary must have received this formation in her home. And so mission begins with ourselves, because we need to allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by the love of Christ. And so the first mission perimeter is the heart, to allow the love of Christ to overwhelm us to love. And so this love of Christ transforms our lives, that we are no longer the old creation, but made anew. We can only love and be sent when we first encounter the love of Christ. And so today, the two saints, St. Mary Magdalene and St. Anne, remind us of the importance of the encounter with the love of Christ. The encounter with the love of Christ that changes us. And so with the theme, the city on a hilltop, it shines, not because of its nice building, nice stained glass, but because the people first encountered and allowed Christ to transform them. The parish is vibrant not because we have many activities, not because the church looks nice, not because St. Anne is at the corner of Sengkang East Way, but rather the people of God allowed themselves to be transformed by the love of Christ. And so this brings me to my second point. Mission changes how we see people. Mission is about learning how to look at people as Christ does. The world looks at success or failures, educated or uneducated, rich or poor, but we need to look through the lens of Christ. How can I be life-giving and loving to people? Especially in my mission field. We are all called to mission. Whether you are a son, you are a husband, wife, daughter, you are an employer, employee, all of us are called to mission. But how do I show love of Christ to others? As I was preparing the homily for this evening, there was a sentence by the ex-US President John Kennedy, who used this phrase in his inaugural address. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Similarly, my dear friends, after we encounter the love of Christ, we need to ask ourselves then, what can I do for Christ and His church? I cannot just keep the love of Christ in my heart, because the love of Christ overwhelms us. The love of Christ compels us. And so how can I then bring the love of Christ into my family, work, play, and other social circles? The mission perimeter widens because our heart widens. Our heart is like a rubber band that God stretches. Sometimes we feel that we are being stretched a lot. But the only difference between us and the rubber band is that we won't snap if we put God first in our mission parameters. And we see here in the gospel, Jesus told Mary Magdalene, do not cling on to me. It's not that Jesus wants to abandon her. It's not that Jesus tell her, go away, don't cling to me anymore. But rather, Jesus is stretching the hearts of Mary Magdalene so that his message can be given to Mary Magdalene to share with the saddened and disappointed disciples. If we don't put God first, many of us in ministry especially, we suffer burnouts. We get demoralized by the rejections and unanswered prayers. Perhaps we get demoralized because when we complain to the priest don't want to entertain us. We get perhaps all this. But if God is not at the center, we will continue to feel and experience all these forms of desolations or restlessness. It's no longer God who is the center of our lives and mission, but rather it is about me, myself, and I. Mission then changes how we see people. It's not about how many people can I share with Christ. Yes, that is important. But the quality is equally important, like how we live out our lives. Yes, we falter, we fail at times, but it is also about the turning round, turning back to Christ each time we fall. Christ looked at Mary Magdalene not just with sympathetic eyes, but having that connection with Mary. And that is what mission is. And that is how mission changes how we see people. Because Jesus connected with Mary at where she was at. In turn, Mary brings that same connection with the disciples. And that's why the church says that Mary Magdalene is the apostle of apostles. Very often, when we talk about mission is not just about accomplishing something, although it's quite a Singaporean thing, right? We need to be efficient, we need to get A's, we need to get good jobs, get good salary, etc. But mission is about sharing that connection. How can I then be human and following Christ, allowing Christ to show me how to be human? Meaning to say, how can I connect with other people? How can I connect with others in my mission parameters? We share Christ by having that connection with Him and to bring Christ to others and others to Christ. And so when we first experience and encounter the Lord to be transformed by His love, we can then now put on new lens to our mission parameters. Now, my dear friends, we need to put that into action. And so this brings me to my final point, to be sent out. In the gospel today, Jesus told Mary Magdalene, "Do not cling on to me," right? And then Jesus said, Go and find the brothers and tell them, I'm ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God. That is the mission for Mary Magdalene. And that mission, again, changes how the disciples look at the life of Jesus, how their lives are then transformed, and how are they being sent out as the apostles. Because the root understanding, the root word for apostle is to be sent out. When we talk about sending out, the family plays a very integral part in our society. It is the place where values and virtues are first taught, where love and sacrifice are first experienced, where fidelity and forgiveness are first learned. The love of Christ, received and shared in the family, flows to the parish to give the parish a sense of belonging. We often say that it takes a village to raise a child. The parish has to be that village, that city on the hilltop. We need to allow the Holy Spirit to lead and to guide us to fill the gaps in the parish and passing the light. Sometimes I ask the youth in my parish, what do you want to do in the parish? How do you want to serve? Then they say, okay, they want to do this, they want to do that. But very often, I ask them also, are we addressing the needs of the parish? Meaning to say, do I first recognize where are the gaps? Where are the areas where I can contribute with my gifts and talents? And mission parameters is like this, similar, right? We recognize the need, we recognize the gaps, and then we use the gifts and talents that God has given us to fill all these gaps so that this parish can truly be the city on a hilltop. The city on a hill shines because our marriages are renewed, families forgive, our young people discover the real purpose in life through Christ, elderly become witness and examples of hope, and children learn about faith. St. Anne and St. Joachim, often we say that they are the patron saints of grandparents. And there are really wisdom and virtue in that, because the elderly can teach us many valuable things in life, the hidden wisdom, the accumulated wisdom that they have, and to share with all of us. And truly, the elderly is really the asset that the human society can have and should cherish. And so going back to the love of Christ, the love of Christ compels us to be sent out. Mary Magdalene was sent out to the apostles. And so when we look at Mary and we look at St. Anne, they too, by their lives, perhaps in their silent ways, they too allowed the mission parameters to be filled with the love of God. Mary Magdalene brought the good news of the resurrection to the 7 apostles to renew their faith, hope, and love. And so the love of Christ compelled her to proclaim the gospel. My dear friends, that is the basis of mission, the proclamation, the sharing of the resurrection, the sharing of how Jesus died for you and I. When we look at St. Anne, yes, perhaps we can say that she lived rather a silent life compared to St. Mary or Magdalene, because not much is said about her in the scriptures. But again, St. Anne continues to pray and intercede for all of us. St. Anne continues to move the hearts of many. And especially here in Singapore, Malaysia, we have many of our Catholics who come to St. Anne's Church, whether here in Sengkang or in Penang. They too turn to St. Anne to ask for her intercessions. And in turn, they are being sent out. Right? Because by virtue of our baptism, we too are being sent out. Those of us who watch Bishop Barron, he always reminds his listeners and his viewers that our life is not about us, but our life is about our Lord Jesus. And so, going back to my appetizer story, the son of the two elderly was truly sharing the life of Christ. Just simply by encouraging his parents to sign up for RCIA, that itself is a simple act of missionary. How many of us here actually ask our parents, our relatives, perhaps even our neighbors to sign up for RCIA? Right? So the mission parameters, we do not need to look far. Yes, if you want to do mission overseas, sure. But the mission is also here in our neighborhoods, in our family, in our parish. How are we then sharing the love and the light of Christ? And so, my dear friends, as we come to receive the Eucharist, we pray that our parish will continue to be the mission on the hill of Sengkang, to encounter the love of God and to see how mission changes each and every one of us. That we see people for who they are and not for some accomplishments. And finally, to be sent out to the mission